Welcome back to Open Studio. I am Steve Leahy. This is episode 2 of the Tokyo painting, or Through Lachlan's Eyes. I should really do a video on this, but it's pretty simple the way I kind of do all this fun stuff with the laying out. So the photograph was a little bit bigger than this that Lachlan had taken. So I took that into Photoshop, straightened it out a little bit, and then cropped it to where I wanted. So there was all the vertical information, like I said, the photo was a little bit wider. So it's just a matter of figuring out, scale-wise, what I wanted to include. And compositionally, it's nice to kind of have it divided. This is, I try to divide things into thirds. I think it makes more of an interesting painting, depending on what it's going to be. So as far as the sky goes. So if it was, if the sky was really interesting and I needed to show just a little bit of the ground, essentially, it would be divided in thirds that way. Like the bottom third would be ground, and then the 2/3 on top would be the sky. In this case, it's all about the city, so it's 2/3 city and 1/3 sky. And then it's great. It's got this kind of river going through it, which is nice and kind of cuts across and adds a little bit of interest as far as that goes. And also, the scale of the buildings in the front to the back give it a lot of depth, as well as the river. So it all worked out. And I do all that in Photoshop, figure it all out, and then I make a bunch of photocopies that are to scale so that I can do use the photocopies as my little kind of guides, template guides. All right. When I told you this was nitpicky, this is what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do, I almost feel like I have to apologize to you all, in advance, because again, it's fun. So what I want to do is I want to kind of give myself a roadmap, and it's funny that this is, a city, so it actually makes even more sense. Obviously this photocopy is in black and white because I really only need the values. I need to know where things are, basically. This isn't to necessarily lay out different colors. It's really just to let me know where things are. So what I want to do is I want to pick like really dark areas in here. And those are what I'm going to be cutting out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer because we'll be doing a lot of nitpicky cutting in here. It is super conceivable that the entire episode is just going to be me cutting. Again, because this painting has a lot of repetitive effort, if that makes sense, All right, so let me get the camera a little bit closer, and that way we can, we can get you guys a little bit better view of what's going on. Great. Okay, so with something this crazy and this complex, it's like, I'm sure, I think it, so hopefully you are too, or maybe you are, or maybe not, but I'm like, where do you even start? Like, where would I even start cutting? Because there's so much to look at. So to make it easy on myself, I start with the darkest areas first. And that gives me, something to just kind of latch on to, a beginning, so to speak, that first step. Again, I want to be as accurate as possible here. I'll just parrot what I said in the first episode. There are so many ways to get this done. This my way is very literal. It lets the viewer kind of connect the dots and make, have their own feeling about it because they have all the information. But a more abstract painting of Tokyo would give someone a similar feeling through a different experience. So again, there's really, I don't know, there's so many ways to pull this off. Sorry, you guys get the close-up of my bruised finger. That's what happens when you slam a flat file drawer on your finger. They are big, huge, heavy drawers, and they slide really easily, and I started closing it, didn't stop, and it ended up whacking my finger. So sorry about that. Again, I'm just kind of concentrating on the darkest areas. I don't have to have all the darkest or just the darkest areas. I can like pick a lighter gray or than what I'm cutting out now. But for the most part, I'm just kind of, it's like I said, it's easier to make that decision to start cutting somewhere, to do something. And for me, it's easiest to do the darkest. Again, This is just a road map, and you'll see what I mean when I spray this in, which again may not even be this episode. I'm just going to keep cutting. The other thing I'm not going to do is like cut after you guys are gone. The whole point of the Open Studio is you guys see everything. And well, you know, with the exception of watching paint dry, we don't have to, you know, go through that. Like with the primer on the last episode, that's just, you know, that's just not what we need to do. But for the cutting, I'm going to show you everything. So again, you know, it takes a while to get it done, but I want you guys to be able to see what, you know, what really goes into one of these little cityscapes. And again, as I said in the first episode, the goal for me is I really, really want someone to look at this and say, yeah, man, I worked in that building, or, you know, I lived in that building, or there's a restaurant in this building that I really like. I've had it happen at shows where people have looked at these paintings and then picked out things, and that makes me really, really happy. You know, that's what I want, because then it's not just an experience about, oh, you know, that's you know, a painting of Tokyo. It is literally a painting of Tokyo. There's like there's no gray area there. So I really love that. All right. And like I said in the first episode, this will give us a lot of time to soapbox because there's a lot of repetitive stuff that goes on with this. Again, if you haven't seen any other episodes, I use X-Acto number 11. It's my go-to blade. I just really, really love it. They work really, really well. Super sharp. They keep their points the longest of what I've seen. And I just, I'm really comfortable with it. You know, the way that the blade works and the way it cuts and the angle of the point and pretty much everything. I just like it a lot. So there was a great question that came up on one of the live feeds from Michael McClung asking if, you know, how long they last for me. And you're going to kind of see that firsthand now. So this is a brand new blade, and I usually replace the blade when I'm getting started on something, especially something intricate. If I'm just cutting out like a general background, then you know, I may not need a new blade for that. But for something like this where it's all super, you know, detailed and really, you know, really fine cuts, then I'll always grab a new blade. And what I'm feeling for as I'm cutting these blades, when they're brand new, they have this great, you would think these, well, I was going to say you would think these cut really, really easily, and they do. But when you have a brand new blade, there's just the slightest resistance as you cut. So it's really easy to cut, but you can feel this little bit of resistance. So as the blade dulls, you lose that resistance because the blade kind of starts to lose that super sharp edge. So you get more of a dulled edge, which kind of like glides across the paper instead of catches the paper and cuts. So and it's subtle. You know, when I end up swapping out a blade because I'm doing something crazy like this, usually you could still, there's still a lot of life in that blade when I end up getting rid of it. But all these micro cuts, I'm going to flip this over to kind of show you what it looks like so far. All these little micro cuts, I mean, this blade does a great job at that. So taking the time with this and getting, you know, the accurate roadmap to start does so many things for me. Again, it puts the buildings in where they should be for me, which is number one. But by default, it also helps me get all the perspective in as well. You know, these buildings are in Tokyo, they're set up, you know, it doesn't really look like a grid pattern here. It looks very much like where I grew up in Boston. The roads were originally old roads and didn't have skyscrapers on them. They weren't thinking of skyscrapers when they set up the roads, so they weren't grid shaped. You know, they weren't thinking big city. It just evolved into that. I'm getting that vibe from Tokyo as well. But still, even more so, with a you know, random squirrely type roads, I still want that perspective. Like all these buildings here in a row, you know, they've all got And even though it's really small, there's perspective from this first building out to this last building. They're different sizes and everything, but they still follow, if these buildings are on a straight road, they still follow that perspective. So by cutting all this stuff out, I'm really, kind of keeping that perspective in check. Where if, again, like I said in the beginning, if I had just done more of an abstract painting, where I was just kind of like putting in a pattern, that pattern would have to really adhere to that perspective if you want that to feel like all those buildings are really sitting where they should. And again, I said abstract, but that's not really the right word, because an abstract painter wouldn't even be going for something literal. It's not about telling, well, from what I understand, and I don't know a whole bunch about the true abstract art, but what I have talked to people about who are abstract artists is it's not about the story. It's not about it's not about having something even remotely literal. It's just about the artwork itself. All right. I usually keep a little cup nearby. So this is what I put all the little cut-offs in it, not because I'm saving them, just because it's easier to clean up at the end of the day or whenever I end up cleaning up. That you don't have little tiny bits of paper everywhere. Don't get me wrong, there are little tiny bits of paper everywhere because they don't always get in the cup. But this kind of, makes me feel like I'm at least trying. I'm not going to lie, I'm super nervous about this open studio. Not because I think, believe it or not, I've done enough of these that it's not that they're not a challenge, they really are. But I've done enough of them to know the process now really well. So I'm not worried about it not coming out the way I want it to, surprises that way. What I'm really, really worried about is that this is entertaining enough for everyone. Again, I felt I really needed to do this. I really needed to kind of show the entire process of one of these crazy, super detailed cityscapes. But again, my hope and always is to make something entertaining as well. So I'm going to need your help as we go along. If you could add to the comments, and if you have any questions or thoughts on any of the soapboxes that are going on, or if I do something and you want a little bit more clarification, let's make this open studio as interactive as possible, and that way I can make sure that I give you guys back all kinds of stuff as well, so that you're not just sitting watching paint dry. And again, it's me. I feel like it's a crazy way to paint, and that that I'm the only one that enjoys it, I guess. But I'm finding through the interactions of everyone that that's not the case. That you guys do enjoy it as well, and it really blows me away, and it makes me happy. So thank you for that, and you guys can keep me in check. All right. So where it gets really, like these are a lot of small little buildings here. Again, I try not to get overwhelmed with it, and if I am, I'm constantly trying to figure out, okay, what is this? Is this the side of a building? Is this the top of a building, or whatever? If it gets to be a section where it's really, really like difficult to figure it out, I just don't. I just say, okay, just cut me out the dark area. I don't care what it is at this point, but I just cut it out, and we'll work on it. So that's how those things go, and like I said, it keeps me relatively sane, I guess. So I'm not like really trying to analyze and figure out everything. That comes as you paint it. You try to make sure things look the way they should. I'm gonna get I'm gonna get this line too. Rarely with paintings this scale do I need to use a ruler. Sometimes I do, and to cut with a ruler is nice. Oh, I don't have it here. So this is a cutting rail from Art Tool, and this is the little 6-inch one right here. I love these things. I have them in all different sizes. I have a 24-inch, a 12-inch, and a 6-inch, and these are designed to cut. So as you're cutting a straight edge, you got your fingers protected here. And it's got a regular ruler, and it's also got this foam backing, so it holds whatever you want really steady. You can't even move that. The one thing about this for making really micro cuts, though, that foam pulls it off the surface, so sometimes it's hard to line up a really tiny cut because your blade has play because it's sitting up off the surface. You know what I mean? I don't have it here, but I have a small metal ruler without anything on the bottom. It's 6 inches also, or maybe even 4 inches. 4 inches, I think. And that sits right down on the surface, and that allows me to kind of put the blade right up against the edge of the ruler and just drag it across. Again, I could do it with this, but there's a little bit of play where the ruler that's right down on the surface for the small cuts is easier to kind of make sure you're in exactly the right spot. So that's my ruler story. I won't need it for this one, but sometimes it happens, when I have a long, long thin cut that needs to be really straight. So make sure I'm showing you guys that I don't creep off the camera, because that's the other thing too. I get so into this that I'm not even paying attention to what you guys can see, and I'll be doing all kinds of work and you guys won't see it. So we'll try. It's a combination when I'm cutting from just a regular, kind of push it into the paper and then drag it, to sometimes when the cuts are really small, it's just pushing it into the paper, So it's a little bit of both. Now, pushing it into the paper runs the risk of damaging the end of the knife faster than normal, so you just take that. If that's what you got to do to get the cut the way you want it, you take the loss on the blade. But again, X-Acto blades are really, really great. They hold up really well to most abuse, and I can get a lot of cutting done using both techniques. All right. This again is heavy-duty copy paper from Staples, and I like it because it just cuts really well. It holds its shape when you spray on it too. The thinner paper, when you get a little bit of paint on it, it will immediately buckle. But this stuff holds up through a couple sprays, which is nice. How are we looking? Actually, we're making pretty damn good time. I'm happy. I mean, we are going to spend the whole episode cutting, so there's no doubt there, and likely the beginning of next episode. But yeah, I'm happy. It's actually, like I said, covering a bunch of ground, which is good. So this whole first step does two things for me, and I'll mention it again when we actually get to painting. First, it establishes the value of these dark areas, shows me, I'm putting in all the dark areas first, but more importantly, it acts as the roadmap. So when I'm done with this, I have little markers all over this painting of where the next little detail goes. So I've got the overall area kind of painted in, and with that I can build off of that and kind of put all the rest of the details in. So this whole thing isn't all just cut out details, spray it and then I'm done. This is really just the first step in that process. As far as airbrushing versus paintbrushing on these paintings, it's a lot more paintbrush than airbrush, which is fine. I don't care. I'm not out to produce airbrush paintings. I'm just out to produce paintings. So I find the cityscapes on average are, majority of it is paintbrush work. There is airbrushing because it's just works for the way I work, but yeah, there's no, I don't set out to be like, okay, this has to be 50% airbrush and 50% paintbrush, or, oh, this is a landscape, so this is going to be whatever percentage. It is what it is, you know. Sometimes landscapes use a lot more airbrushing because of the way that they're set up for me, and sometimes I use more paintbrush. It just is what it is. I'm going to use some scratching on this too to get some of the really fine, lighter details, which will be fun. So again, I don't know. The tools that I use don't determine what this painting is. Even though, you know, paintings are classically categorized by the medium that's used for them, like oil painting or watercolor or whatever. So in the end, if you use that mentality, then this is just an acrylic painting. So it is not an airbrush painting, because you don't often hear people say, oh, you know, this is a palette knife painting, or this is a paintbrush painting. If you ever said that, people would be like, oh, that's wonderful. What are you, 5? I did this with a paintbrush. Congratulations. So I feel that way about airbrushing too. I know why people do it, because there is a certain novelty to the airbrush, which, you know, and I even have it. I have airbrush art, or, you know, most of my tags are airbrush, because it's something that people find interesting, and I like that. But when it boils right down to it, it's not really about the tool, you know. I mean, it is, because you need the tool to do the effects, but I have no problem using whatever it takes. And the weirder the better. You know, when I see this, you know, people to do these different pieces of art, and they use all these different techniques, I love it, because I'm so process driven. Like, I love to hear what people did to get their paintings to, or whatever, their artwork to look the way that it does. So I'm all about the process, even though, you know, in the same breath, I'm like, oh, the process doesn't matter. It's what it is in the end. But yeah. I'll give you the preview again. This has come along great. Who would have thought, right? So again, if I get bogged down, I'm looking for, like in here, like I'm just looking for the dark areas. Bogged down meaning like, what the hell do I cut out next? You know, that meaning that, bogged down. So Lachlan currently, when actually trying to think, because this is trying to think when this is going to air in real life, and I'm pretty sure Lachlan will still be in Tokyo when the first episode premieres. She's having a blast. So she went there for school. She goes to OSU, and she's having a blast there. So super excited for her. This area in here is really dark, but it's also, you know, if I start cutting out too much, then the other cuts I made are going to fall out. So I got to be kind of careful of that. Let's set up whatever this is. I think these are trees, but they're really dark. So we're just going to kind of indicate them as well. And it's great. You know, as this painting progresses, I will get, you know, I'll kind of do all the homework on it and research. Those who are familiar with Tokyo will probably know where this tower is and what its name is, but I do not know what it is yet. And that's half the fun with a lot of these paintings, is to get to know the city, because I'm spending a lot of time in it virtually by doing the painting. So it's fun to kind of, you know, catch up on all the ins and outs, and that really helps the painting too, because if I understand what I'm looking at, where I'm at, you know, it makes for a better painting, because I'm vested now in it, rather than just painting a random city. Some of the other ones like New York and Boston, those were, especially Boston, was easy because I've been there so much. So I'm already vested, I knew what I was painting. But the Cincinnati painting was neat. That was a lot of fun because I'd only been to Cincinnati a couple times. So so a lot of that was new and weirdly like reminiscent, because I remember it was funny. I went to Cincinnati for the very first time way back in the 2000s. There was an airbrush event for anything airbrushed, and they would have these open houses, and so I ended up going to one of them. I flew into actually I can't remember where I flew into, but anyway, yeah, I went to the event in Cincinnati and it was a blast. And I remember certain bits about the city, but then now 20 years later I live in Ohio, so we were going down to Cincinnati for an art show and for gallery opening, and I'm like, holy crap, I've been here. So that was a lot of fun. And then as I'm painting it, the whole image, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And kind of seeing the different the different perspective on it was really a lot of fun. So I've never been to Tokyo, so this is I'm kind of just going by the photo and that's it. So it'll be fun to learn about it, get all that, all the interesting facts about this particular view. And I'm sure, like I said, if you're familiar with Tokyo, you're already up on it, and I think that's great. And again, if you are familiar with Tokyo, what I really want to have happen is someone look at it and say, oh yeah, I know what that building is. It's not just me throwing stuff in. Yeah, we're gonna be cutting this next week too. That's the other thing. At last, I was asking you guys to help me and be interactive. I generally record a few of these at a time. It's nice for me to get into a rhythm because rarely do I ever work on a painting for a half an hour and then just stop. So it's totally true with these open studio paintings. Usually, at least an hour and a half, 2 hours to kind of get into the groove. So that translates for open studio into about 3 or 4 episodes. And I'll record them all at once. So I'm asking you guys for comments and questions and all that. But I won't get to them in real time until they actually air. So there is that weird, again, time travel thing. But I promise you, as these air and you guys have questions, I will address them as we go. If not, later in future episodes, I will respond directly to your comments. I try to do that anyway, but but I'll try to respond directly to the comments. And also, again, with technique and stuff like that, if I see a question on a technique or something like that, and I can incorporate into the video, I absolutely will. Like if you have a question specifically about cutting and that kind of thing, I can definitely be more clear in the video for real. So I'll try to do that too. All right, a couple more cuts and I think we're going to be good for this episode. Still got to do the rest of it. And normally with, with any painting, I usually work with music on, but especially with these paintings that are very repetitive, just kind of tuck in and go for it type of thing, I'll always have music on, so it helps to pass the time. And it's like anything repetitive that you would do, sometimes you just kind of not turn your brain off, but I guess that's a pretty accurate kind of description of it. For this, really, like I'm just hunting out those dark areas, so I really don't have to think too heavily about, color theory or anything like that, composition and blah, blah, blah. It's just basically kind of going through the motions. So it's great. You put on some music and just kind of get it done. Obviously, because of copyright fund, we can't really have music live here, meaning me have music playing while the video is recording. You can add music after, but doesn't do me any good now. So it's the other thing about this. And I noticed it just now, which is why I brought it up. I'm like, it seems very quiet in here while I'm working. So what I'll do is I will show you what I've got so far. And in a half an hour, I've made really, really good time. I've got the bulk of the foreground kind of cut out. And this is what it looks like right now. And I know this looks like a mess, but it will come together, I promise. So we're going to pick this up right from where we left off next week. If it took me a half an hour to get all this done, I should have this cut out and we should be able to put the first layer of paint down next week. So great. So thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. The new painting is underway finally. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. That would be amazing. And also, if you want to support what we do here, you can do what these lovely people have done. Their direct support keeps the lights on here, and I deeply, deeply appreciate that. All right, so for Steve Leahy and Open Studio, and Through Lachlan's Eyes, the Tokyo painting, I will catch you guys next week.